Welcome to the RetailWire podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another great episode here on the RetailWire podcast. I'm really excited because we have a guest with us in the studio today that we've not had anybody like this before. To what we're getting ready to talk about, and I'm super pumped because today's conversation we're going to be centering around brand identity, what it is, why it's important, why you need it, and why it's important for brands to really understand their own brand identity. So this person that I have in the studio with me today, she is involved in leading strategy at brands like Macy's, eBay, Shop Talk. There's a long list of strategy, and then also is currently the Chief Content Officer at the Lead Innovation Summit, and which is actually coming up here in a couple weeks from when we're recording this. So without further ado, I want to introduce Sonal Gandhi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ben.
Absolutely. It's wonderful to have time with you. And, I'm really excited because I know you are currently working really hard on getting the Lead Summit up and running, right? So
Yes,
it's
we
coming up
are
in a couple weeks.
just about 10 days or so away from it. It's on July 12th. We're actually oversubscribed right now, but we
Okay.
still have, we're not at fire capacity, so we can still register more people. But yes, we are. We've definitely sort of, gone above our expectations of we're about 2,600 people registered.
That's got to feel really good, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely talk more about the Lead here in a little while. But I'm really excited about this because we haven't talked brand identity on the Retail Wire podcast yet. And so to have you here, to have you join me, this is going to be really fun for me because I love branding. And it's funny because when you say brand, you have so many people that think, oh, a cool logo
Mhm.
or a catchy name, and so uh, what I guess first of all, before I gave a brief introduction of kind of some of the brands you've worked with and the things you've done, but tell us a little more about who you are, and kind of how you came to be in the space of strategy and brand strategy.
Sure. So I started my career as an industry analyst at Forrester, and I still consider myself a student of the industry or somebody who analyzes what's going on in the industry. I did spend some time in the industry at Macy's and eBay, and so I got to see things from the inside. But for the better part of my career, I've spent sort of analyzing trends both in retail, but also I started with Forrester in media, and then moved to retail when I worked with Macy's. So I consider myself a student of the industry.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and I think that's important for anyone, no matter how big or broad you go, to always remain that student, right? You always have to have that learning mentality because the second that you think you've learned it all,
Mm-hmm.
you're probably one of the farthest people behind.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah, and things change really fast, even though a lot of things remain the same. Technology new technologies is coming up so fast all the time, and consumer behavior changes so fast that you can never really think that you know everything because it'll
yeah.
change tomorrow.
Oh, absolutely. And especially with all the technologies we have kind of entering the marketplace right now and ways that we're unlocking technology that we've already had for a while, but
Right,
now we're able to compound that and we're able to kind of combine some resources together, right?
right.
So you started out with Forrester, and then now one of the things we were talking about a little bit, we're talking about D2C, right? Brand or strategy. We can kind of jump just right into this. Do you think when it comes to D2C, are we calling that more of a brand or is it a strategy, right? Is it something that D2C is just who we are, what we are, or is it more behavior minded?
If you asked me this 5, 6 years ago, there was a lot of brands that we are a D2C brand. Their identity was linked with this business model. But at the end of the day, now, especially since the pandemic, a lot of brands are D2C brands. Almost all brands are D2C brands, right? When D2C is a go-to market strategy for how brands engage with consumers.
Yeah.
Some of these more traditional brands used to primarily go to market through wholesale retail partners and have now really substantially invested in their own direct to consumer capabilities, like the Ralph Lauren's of the world, or Nikes of the world. And so it's not their identity; it's just the way they go to market, and it
Yeah.
affects everything else they do. It affects their wholesale business. It affects their licensing business or their marketplace business. D2C is almost core to a brand strategy now.
So now, what do you think was the driving factor behind? I mean, obviously, I think I know some of the reasoning, but what do you see as some of the driving factors behind why it's less about the strategy or I should say less about something that they were able to add on, and now it's just what they do.
So I think that brands have always wanted to own the relationship with the customer
Hmm.
since the days of the internet, right? They all put up their website, started having some transactions on the website, but for the most part, they were worried about competing against their own partners online, right? So they were kind of keeping a low profile, whatever sales they could get, that through digital marketing, they were happy to take what they can get. But
Mm.
once the pandemic happened, stores were closed. A lot of the retail partner stores were closed, and so it sent a lot of traffic to their own websites, and that pattern continued over the course of the 3 years. And they realized that this was an opportunity for them to really now put all of their investment power behind it. Because at the
Yeah.
end of the day, building a direct relationship with the customer means you can keep the customer, you can treat them the way you want to treat them, you can get to know them, you can get all that data and help take that data all the way back into the supply chain and build products that your customers want. So that is the sort of the goal behind having a direct to consumer marketing strategy. There are margins consideration, right? If you don't have a middleman selling your product, you think you may have better margins, but at the end of the day, that's still debatable because you still have to market and you still have to do fulfillment. So, but I think that data component, owning that relationship with the customer, is really important to the brands now, especially because we're living in an age of data.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I can see being also, just a layer of usability for that and importance would be when you go, not only is it good for the products you have, but the products you're developing, then you don't have to kind of go through that middleman, right? That middle brand or kind of the holder of brands, right? That is saying, oh well, here, let me explain to you why I want to sell this product and what it means for your customer,
Right,
because you're selling direct to customer. So at that point, you just go to your customer and say, "Hey, by the way, did you know we also have
right,
XYZ?" And they're
right.
good to go, and you can explain it. I would imagine that simplifies that process of explaining
Yes.
it exactly the way you want to explain it, right?
Yes, I think that you can build more loyalty to the brand because
Mhm.
you're able to create that direct relationship with the customer. I think
Yeah.
the one important thing to note is, you know, retailers, multi-brand retailers were good at aggregating demand, right? That's why brands relied on them. They didn't want to be
Mhm.
going out in the market to aggregate demand. And they were good at delivering. They were good at delivering on the promise of the operations. Um, but with the internet, it's kind of a level playing field, right? The brands
Yeah.
can go and do digital marketing on their own, although it's expensive. And also, there's a lot of now point solutions and technologies that you can use to deliver just as good of a shopping experience, if not better, to your customer. So that whatever capabilities a retailer can have, you can have it too, and
Yeah.
that helped make that possible.
Well, and yeah, exactly. I think it plays really well to small businesses, especially because, like you said, the internet's a level playing field. So you can have as big of a presence visually as you really can imagine,
Right,
right? Like you can create this image, this persona that your brand is much larger than it actually probably is. You could be somebody selling out of a garage, but you can have an online web presence that, if you know how to brand properly and if you know how to connect with your customers and how to create targeted ads
yep,
across the different social media platforms, like you're saying, you could totally outperform the big brands. You could outperform the Nikes on a some scale, right? Some level, some niche market. You can absolutely outperform some of those big brands because you know who you are, and that ties
Yeah,
right back to brand identity.
right.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Definitely, the internet has leveled the playing field. I mean, the brands like Nike have deep pockets and are
yeah,
able to, stay in front of the consumer, upper funnel tactics, and spend on that. But
yeah,
for a small, young startup brand, you could still, eat away on that market share.
yeah.
you know,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah. So
Well, and it's like, you think about the small business or the medium business taking on the big giants in the industries. The giants have kind of they do have the advantage that they can take loss leaders, right? They could take a product that might not be making them money, but if it's leading you to purchase deeper,
yeah.
then, they might be willing to take that risk. Whereas your small or medium business might not have that flexibility, and
Mhm.
so they're going to be a lot more intentional, right?
Mhm.
You
That's
see
right.
your large brands that are willing to take risks on scattershot everywhere. Let's get everything we can out there because something will lead to productivity, something will lead to income.
Right.
But your small businesses have to be a little more tactical with exactly where they go to
Right.
start their ball rolling, right?
And they have to have a very compelling value proposition, and they have to be very earnest about who they are, right? Consumers are looking, they go to small brands because they want that the feeling of closeness that you get with a small
Yeah,
brand, right? That brand gets me and is building this product for me, is responsive to me. I get to talk to a person when I call, or something of that sort, and so that authenticity, which is an overused word, that a small brand can provide, that larger brands are definitely trying to replicate.
yeah. And I think, the larger brands are starting to see that more. We're seeing a shift right now, and we've actually written a couple pieces on it recently where, is it good for big brands to have their CEO or their CMO or somebody actually have their own personal account on TikTok or Instagram to connect with people?
Right.
And we're seeing that more and more because, like you said, the authenticity, which is funny because it does get overused, but people can smell fakes.
Yeah.
And if you just are a brand that's throwing out an account and you come up with a fake persona and you come up with this character that is selling through this account, people are going to figure that out
Yeah.
pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But I think it's really cool to see when, your head of production for somebody might be out just showing you their day to day,
Yeah.
and so then you start relating and seeing them as less of a brand and more of the person that
Yes.
happens to be associated with that
Mm-hmm.
brand.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
let's talk brand identity for a minute. What for people who are listening,
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's someone who doesn't know what we're talking about, or maybe they're still wrapping their minds around it. They're fresh to the industry. When we say brand identity, what actually is brand identity? Like, what are the components that kind of make up what brand identity is in 2023 and beyond?
I think to me, it's always been the same thing. It is the image that you invoke in a consumer's mind when they hear your brand's name, or the emotion that you evoke, right? So it's if I look at some brands like Nike that have had that staying power, it's like, what is the emotion I get when I hear of Nike or see an image of Nike, or see their product? It's the emotion of, a well-made product that's going to enable me to be better, right? Enable me
Mhm.
to be better performing at whatever sport, right? To me, that's the association. So what's that association the customer has that's personal to them, right?
Yeah,
It isn't about your product, it's about how you make me feel when I think about
exactly.
your product. And I think that is what brand identity is. I'll give you another example of Away Travel, which is one of those D2C brands, or a brand that started as a D2C brand, or we call them digital natives to be specific, actually. Um, when you look at their imagery, when you think about Away, you think of traveling to exotic places. You don't think about suitcases. you think about travel, you think about the lifestyle that you want to aspire to be able to go to some cool place and travel with my trendy luggage, that feeling of being cool is what kind
Yeah.
of what they inspire. And I think that to me is a brand identity for a way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You're instilling the sense of like the feeling of freedom, right? You're instilling the sense of I've made it, I've accomplished something. Now I get to go and chill and
Yeah,
just relax.
I get to
So
go see cool places and be cool, right? Like, because we also we live in the in the social media era where nothing's real unless it's recorded.
right. And even then, who knows because there's AI.
Yeah.
So
So if I can take a picture of myself with my away luggage in Egypt or whatever in Paris,
yeah,
then now that I'm cool. So that's I
makes it
think
real.
is that's what
Absolutely.
a good brand identity is, and that invoking that positive feeling in the consumer about themselves, about
Yeah.
something aspirational.
Yeah, I think you nailed it there because it's not about I think a lot of times, especially brands that are starting out, maybe they have a killer product, right? They have an incredible product, but then they're going, okay, well, how do I market this to people? Well, I need a sexy brand. I need a cool hook, and it's going to be, oh, I'm going to have this really amazing logo, and I'm going to have these colors, and there is some color theory and everything plays in with that, obviously, but I think sometimes people get so in the weeds on what the actual brand name looks like
Mm-hmm.
that they flip it and they forget exactly what you're saying. It's not about, I'm not selling you like, I love this, by the way. This is not a knock on this brand I'm getting ready to show you. Like, I love the image that you've probably know this one, Psycho Bunny. So they're a really cool clothing brand, fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they don't sell based on this, right? And
Right.
that's what makes them really cool.
Yeah.
Um, this is all over their product, absolutely.
Right.
But they're selling this sense of like a little edgy,
Yeah.
very cool, but also very classy, very high end. And so this actually came off of, I wasn't even planning on talking about this, but
Mm-hmm.
this came off of some swim trunks. It's a floating keychain.
Yeah.
And so that's where exactly what you're saying, they have their identity. Sure, they have a logo and it's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but they also know who they are and who they're going after, right? They're going for that young crowd, that crowd that thinks, even if you're young in at heart instead of young in body,
Mm-hmm.
you want to feel edgy. You want to feel really cool,
Yes.
laying by the pool or
Mm-hmm.
out on the golf course or whatever else.
Right.
And it's funny because you think, we keep talking about Nike a little bit. It's funny how much crossover in some areas that Nike has with Lululemon,
Right.
but they have an entirely different audience and they have
Mm-hmm.
an entirely different way they make you feel. But in some senses, they sell the exact same products,
Right.
just in a different way.
They do, and they're both like brands that people look up to, right?
Absolutely.
Lululemon is again, it has a certain sense of, a Lululemon customer when you see them, right?
Yep.
It's like what type of customer is going to buy Lululemon, what do they aspire to, and so they've carved out this niche in a very crowded marketplace, right? Like athleisure or athletic wear, just so many different brands out there, and they both seem to be really successful in creating that identity, that hook about themselves, and keeping that customer base, coming back for more.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've been talking about a few things. One of the things is it's funny because we've been talking about brands, and one of the brands that I absolutely love
Mm-hmm.
is Liquid Death, right? And so this is not a promotion or anything like that. It's not
Sure.
paid or sponsorship, but it's funny because we think of brands like Liquid Death, you think of brands like Tesla, you think of Walmart or the Home Depot. These brands have figured out their identity, who their core shopper is, and what makes them different, what makes them set apart in such a way. And we could go on for probably hours naming brands that have truly figured out who they are
Mm-hmm.
at their core, who they want to sell to,
Right.
and then they figured out how to connect with those people.
Right.
So I could go on and on about
Yeah.
this. I love brand identity because we get so wrapped up in so many different details, but at the end, like you said, it comes down to the image that you're presenting to
Mm-hmm.
your customer,
Yeah.
right?
I think that Liquid Death and some of the brands that you mentioned, you know, they people call it the brand purpose, right? What is
Hmm.
the purpose? Why do you exist? Why do I need another water brand, right?
Yeah.
What is your so knowing that purpose is and a lot of different, you know, even sort of somewhat legacy brands that started with a purpose have somehow, you know, gone away from it, forgotten what
Hmm.
it was, right? And they're now, because a consumer today wants to know why should I buy this? Who are you? You know, and so they are going back and digging back into their own history, into their own heritage, to reconnect with their purpose and find their purposes. So we have a brand who's talking about it at the summit, the, you know, Fossil, which is a watch brand that stands for craftsmanship, right? And you know, in heritage, and every new generation needs a reminder what they stand about. They need to be told the story again and again. You can't imagine that a 40-year-old and a 20-year-old will look at your brand the same way. So every brand has to keep going back and retelling that story in a new way to a different generation of consumer.
Yeah. Absolutely. And it's funny too because not only is it about passing that down, but it's also knowing what to pass on, like what to overlook, right? What to get rid of and how
Yeah,
to stay focused because it's funny you brought that up too with the just they need to be retold. And I think of, heritage just in general. You think of any culture, right? You think of any of our pasts and the families that came down, the way that they passed on the culture of the brand identity, right, of the family.
mm-hmm.
And that is by sitting around the campfire or sitting around the kitchen or sitting around the RV park and hanging out while you're camping and showing, hey, we're always a really outdoorsy family, or anything like that, or we come from a long line of this. I think that's so important because it gives you identity, it
Yes,
gives you brand,
yes,
right? And so that does drive your purpose later, and you go, I do have something to contribute, and it's probably going to be centered around this. And
yes.
so
Yeah.
I think
Well,
that's
I
really
think
important.
storytelling is like the most important thing for brands right now, just as it is for human beings, right? Human beings love stories, and what we're finding is that's how we connect. That's how we know who we are. Like you said, we know the stories of our family, what our grandfathers do and grandmothers do, and where they came from and why they came to where they are. That gives us a sense of our own identity. So brands
Yeah.
need to keep doing that, keep retelling that story.
Yeah. So let's shift a little bit and say, like, I know we've been talking about establishing brand identity, right? But how do you define growth for different brands? How do you go from, once you've established your identity, once you've established kind of where you're at and who you're serving, growth isn't like a one size fits all, right? So physical expansion, like if you're growing here, it might mean different things. We mentioned the Nike and Lululemon thing. We mentioned, you have your Liquid Death versus Dasani or someone like that, and so your growth is going to look different across any different market. But how do you define that for different brands?
So it does depend on, you know, where you are in your journey. For a brand like Nike that is already well established and has an identity, very clear identity, they're now, what I've seen is now sensing the shift in the consumer, right? The consumer isn't just about sort of running or sports, right? They're also about wellness, and they're also about feeling good about who they are. And so you can see them shifting their tactics a little bit to fit into that story. So to
Yeah.
me, the growth is about evolving with your consumer, right? The consumer is not static. The generations change. They want different things, but also I am a different person than I was 20 years ago. And so, if I want to still like Nike, is Nike still a relevant brand for me? Do they get
Ooh.
me who I am now, right? And so,
Yeah.
evolving with your consumer, staying relevant as norms change, as sensibilities change in the society, as aspirations change, is to me what defines brand growth, right? Being able to continue to be relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so key because I think we tend to think that if someone likes the brand now, then they'll just like my brand forever,
Yeah,
right?
right,
But you're right. I become a different person. If you look at me 5 years ago versus 10 years ago versus 15 and 20,
right,
I was probably four different people across all of those than the fifth person I am today.
right.
So I think it's so good to see, to be reminded of that, that brands need to shift, they need to evolve, they need to grow. And, sometimes a brand just doesn't grow with you, or you just don't grow with the brand,
True.
right?
Yeah,
And that's okay.
yeah,
But then I think that's where it's so important for other brands to know their own identity. So that way, when you start looking,
right.
then you go, oh, that's me. That's me over there. Okay, I know what to do here. I can transition away from this and I can go into this, and it feels very natural, right? It's funny because New Balance gets like this big dad image, because they're such a comfortable shoe.
Yes.
But there's a reason for that, and it's like, hey, maybe you're not the Nike customer anymore. Maybe you're not the Adidas or the whatever, the Hoka brand.
Yeah,
Maybe you're not the runner you used to be.
yeah,
Maybe you're not that, but you still have some edge. You
yeah,
still have some cool. You still have that desire, but you also want to be really comfortable, and you don't want to have to deal with this.
yes.
Not gonna lie, Sonal, I've looked into Crocs for the first time ever, finally, and I don't know if I should admit that on the air. Don't tell anybody, right? So,
They're very
but that's the
trendy here in
thing.
New York, so
Well, they're extremely trendy, and I'm not gonna lie. I put on my very first pair the other day, and they know their customer. Their customer does not care if they look cool. Their
yes,
customer cares. They're super comfortable.
yes,
They're versatile,
yeah,
and you see it in the medical field. You see it across a bunch of different industries,
yeah,
and so I just think that's really good. Anyways, that was a tangent, but
yeah.
um, no, I think it's really good to know, that your growth is going to look different at different points across your journey,
Your
like you
journey
said.
and your customer's
Um,
journey. But I mean, at the end of the day, all brands want is to grow revenue. Let's not kid ourselves. But it's how do you find find relevance with younger customers so that if your customer is aging out of your brand, that you continue to feed that funnel with younger customers.
yeah,
Or you grow with your customer as they grow and stay relevant so that they keep coming back to you. But
yeah,
you want to protect market share and you want to grow and and find, even if your customer is a certain behavioral segment, if you want to branch out of that segment, right? If you're always appealing to a runner and now you want to be appealing to a yoga fanatic, then you kind of need to evolve with that.
yeah. Well, and this wasn't like on our kind of our pre-plan, but it made me think. You mentioned the pandemic a while ago, and then you think of how brands have had to evolve in some elements, right?
Right.
So I think our generation and our culture today has experienced something that obviously every culture and every society kind of goes through their shifting points, but I can honestly say I don't think we've ever would have expected that to happen, and shut the world down the way that it did.
Right.
Were there any brands that you can think of right off the top of your head that shifted and grew alongside their customers as their customers were forced into this whole different life, a whole different world that they weren't planning on? When you think of what happened during the pandemic, are there, first of all, it's a kind of a two-parter. Is there brands that you saw shift better than others and really just latch, and they knew what to do, they got it even in the midst of total fire,
Mm-hmm.
they just got it? And if so, what do you think made them so successful in doing so and shifting on the fly like that?
And I think I saw, you know, it's okay to flounder for a little while when big things
Yeah.
like that happen. And I think a lot of brands, like all of us, were caught off guard a little bit. And I saw two different things happen. I think on the more sort of large brand side, I saw brands get more focused, right?
Mm,
What's the core? Who am I? I have all this assortment. I have this and this line of style. I just need to find who I am, and focus on the core and sort of do away with, Ralph Lauren is such a brand like that went decided, I have too much going on and I need to focus on the core.
Yeah.
On the smaller end, brands that were about like going out clothes, going to office, really were sort of, on the suffering end of things, right? Because people weren't buying those types of clothes. And I saw a lot of brands sort of take a minute and say, okay, what do we do now?
Yeah.
And then sort of try to shift the assortment to what people wanted while they were still still at home for the better part, of the next year or two. So I think a lot of brands took a minute and took that as an opportunity to do some introspection and to look at
Yeah.
themselves and see, how do we sort of go through that, and came out of it, better as a result of it. They took
Yeah.
the opportunity to remove some of the noise, and into the product assortment or whatever, or to move to shift away from what they were and then come back. I mean, brand like Untuckit, for instance, which was selling men's shirt and men weren't going to the office, definitely had to do that rethinking, right? Like, what do we do now? And now they're back again, and people are wearing shirts again, and going to the store. So it's
Yeah. Shirts without a mustard stain, right? That's what they're wearing now.
I mean, we all realized we wore shirts in the pandemic. It's just
Yeah.
we weren't wearing, belts and formal pants. We were wearing joggers. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so I think that ended up as a good lesson for all brands is to know who you are, like you said, know who your customer is, and have the ability to pivot. I mean, if people aren't going out and they're not buying shirts, you gotta sell them something else, or
Yeah.
or you know narrow your scope for a minute till you can come back out again.
Yeah. Well, and so now shifting away from the past and kind of looking towards the future, what do you see as some good opportunities for future growth? Maybe in the evolution of shopping, like the shopping experience as a whole, right? Like we think of where we're headed right now. We've got a really cool marketplace. We're back open again. The world is primarily open again.
Mhm.
We have shopping experiences are back. Malls are still different than they ever have been before. That's a whole different story. But now you're starting to see new technologies come in, right? I mean, Apple just released their mixed reality headset. You have AI, you have VR, you have all these different opportunities. But where do you see what do you predict for the future of kind of the shopping experience for customers as brands figure out their identities? Like you said, they've stripped down
Mhm.
some of the noise, some of the
Right,
fluff that they had.
right.
And now I feel like really it was a great thing for them to do because I think it made them come out of the pandemic like a rocket,
Mhm.
right? And they were dialed in. Now they're crushing it probably better. A lot of brands are crushing it better now than they were when they went into the pandemic because
Absolutely.
they got focused.
Yeah.
But well, yeah, where do you see the future of the shopping experience?
So I think there's few things I'm really excited about. One, as you mentioned, like in-person experiences. People are putting a lot of creative thought into it. We have someone from H&M talking about their concept store that they've created here in Brooklyn, Williamsburg, and it's a new concept every few months, right? Sometimes it's a clothes, sometimes it's not. I think this month they're doing like a whole gallery experience. So I think brands are really starting to have fun with the in-person experiences. It's not just about I'm going to go to H&M and buy myself a shirt. It's about I'm going to experience a whole, I'm going to discover something new. I might find some interesting art or some kind of a music event. Or so the brands are really sort of rethinking their physical presence as not just a place for transaction, but as a place to express themselves and their
Mm.
identities to customers, and in the process of doing that, create content for the content beast of TikTok and Instagram, that they need to do that all the time, right? You need to have fresh ideas and fresh things to talk about. You can't just talk about your assortment all the time. And
Yeah.
so that is certainly something that, I'm seeing a lot of creativity and creative expression there, which is really exciting. And just being out in person and seeing brands sort of embrace a whole new way of being in the in person is physical stores is amazing. And then the second thing um, I am personally more passionate about is the pressure that brands have to really look at everything that they're doing from a carbon footprint, waste, all those
Hmm.
kinds of criteria, and really sort of look at how can I be better? How can I
Yeah.
make less, um, use less resources and do better in terms of my supply chains, my stores, my last mile to be a better citizen of the planet. So I think those are the
Yeah.
two things that I am really excited about. In terms of technology, it's amazing to see the rise of generative AI in business so fast. We've been talking about AI for 10 years or so, or well, maybe not 10, but 5 or 6 years. But the adoption of generative AI on an informal basis is within the last 6 months, it's incredible.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see a lot of action in that, not just for copywriting or for imagery, but also for planning and design and all kinds of decision making where you can ask your questions about, hey, which store performed well, instead of actually having to go through databases to find that answer or algorithms. Generative AI can give you an answer right away, right? So that
Yeah.
you can so there's a lot of interesting way brands are going to change the way they run their business based on this
Yeah.
technology in the next coming years.
It's really good. It's really good. Yeah, I mean, we have so much coming down the pipeline. I think it's going to be incredible. So, whenever we think of, things that are coming, we think of, the stuff on the cutting edge and reinventing brand image and things like that. I mean, that's actually exactly what you're doing with the lead, right? I mean, that's where the lead comes back in. It's an innovation summit,
Yep.
right? Can you tell people just a little bit about what is the lead and what maybe they can expect if they were to attend the lead or interact with your summit at any way? What's that about?
Sure. So I think our North Star is really about helping brands get better at the go to market strategy of being direct to consumer, right?
Hmm.
How do you become a better direct to consumer business, um, or, or,
Absolutely.
or have a better direct to consumer business, better performing? And so we look at the entire value chain of the direct to consumer business: marketing, e commerce, stores, last mile, sustainability, and some of these other aspects of how do you run a great business. And so we have 2 days of content uh, across these different topics, featuring some of these amazing brands that I just talked about, including Fossil and H&M, and Tapestry. These winning brands that are really sort of owning their direct to consumer journey, or
Yeah.
destiny, really. And we're going to be having these brands share their success stories at the summit. We're in New York City on the water in July, so hopefully it's going to be a great time to be out in New York, and come hear from some amazing brands.
Absolutely. Well, I know Chase and I are going to be up there. So my CEO will be up there, and so we're going to get to hang out with you. Get to meet you at some point there,
Yes.
and we're really looking forward to it because we want to see, yeah, what does growth look like? What does brands taking that next step look like? So, thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate your time, and I know there's we could go on for hours.
Yes.
If someone wanted to know more about you or about obviously the lead or anything like that, I'll go ahead and put the lead's website down here. But is it okay if listeners wanted to reach out to you on LinkedIn or some way through that?
Yeah, absolutely. The lead is on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. We'd love, as I said, we're definitely happy to have more people there. Although we're over our goals, but always can take more. So happy to have more people join us for the summit. And yes, please reach out directly. And as I said, I'm a student. Always look to learn from others.
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure and put the link to your LinkedIn and everything down here in the description, as well as the link to the lead, and people can get to know a little bit more about you.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you. This was
that's
great.
absolutely. Thank you so much. And yeah, if you are listening to this, if this is your first episode, listen to the Retail Wire podcast. make sure and hit that subscribe button because we're on all your favorite podcast platforms. We're also on YouTube. So if you want to see what Sonal or I look like, you can actually head over to our YouTube channel over at RetailWire, and you'll be able to find us there. And connect with us. Leave us a comment. You might see a comment pop up on the next episode or the next couple episodes because we love hearing from you. So let us know what you think, and we will see you next time here for another great episode on the Retail Wire podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Retail Wire podcast.
We hope you enjoyed the episode. Be sure to subscribe to us on your favorite podcasting platform and leave us a comment for a chance to hear it read on the next show. See you next time here on the Retail Wire podcast.